1% every day, Stoic habits to change your life. There's still time. The war is silent, the change is daily. You wake up, nothing looks wrong, no alarms, no enemies, no reason to panic, but something in you is already under siege. Before your feet touch the ground, there's a weight in your chest, a fog in your mind, a whisper that today won't be different, that you'll fail again, that you'll scroll past your time, postpone what matters, and drown in things you won't even remember tomorrow. That voice doesn't scream, it waits, and because it's quiet, you believe it belongs to you, but it doesn't. That voice was built by every excuse you've ever accepted, every morning you let slip through your hands, every promise you made to yourself and then broke in silence. It sounds like you because it's been rehearsing in your head longer than you've been willing to fight it. This is the real war, not outside, inside, the invisible battlefield of thought, habit, and identity. And most people lose before the sun even rises, not because they're weak, but because they never trained their mind to resist what's easy. That's where the Stoic begins, not with shouting, not with motivation, but with clarity. Discipline, stillness, a refusal to let the world decide how the day begins, a rejection of the myth that change must be loud and dramatic to count. You were taught to look for transformation in milestones, in breakthroughs, in once-in-a-lifetime awakenings. But the Stoic knows the truth. Transformation lives in repetition. It lives in small, invisible victories. It lives in the decision to wake up and say, just for today, I will be stronger than yesterday by 1%. Just 1%. That's the part no one sees, the silence before action, the moment you choose to sit with discomfort instead of escaping, to write instead of scroll, to reflect instead of react. That moment is the beginning of change, not the goal, the return. Because no one needs to give you permission to begin again. Not the calendar, not your past, not the people who doubt you, and certainly not the voice that wants to keep you small. You are allowed to restart your life every single morning. You're allowed to drop the shame, the guilt, the waiting, and simply say, I'm back. And if you return to this decision enough times, you become the kind of person who never really left. There will be days when 1% feels like nothing, but over time, 1% becomes everything. It becomes your new identity, your way of walking, your way of seeing. And suddenly, the war doesn't disappear, but it doesn't win either, because now it has to face someone who is no longer asleep. This is not a race. This is your return. The 1% rule, why massive change fails and micro-progress wins. You've been told that change must be big to be real, that unless your life transforms overnight, you're doing something wrong, that unless it feels extreme, painful, loud, it doesn't count. So you start bold. You set huge goals. You chase discipline like a punishment. You try to become someone else in one weekend, and you fail again and again. Not because you're weak, but because the structure you were given was never made to last. Stoicism teaches the opposite. It doesn't praise explosions. It praises direction. It asks one question again and again. Am I better than yesterday? Not by much, just enough. Enough to notice. Enough to remember that I'm still walking towards something. 1% better every day. It sounds small, but that's the point. The mind resists what's overwhelming. It runs from the mountain, but it walks toward a stone. So you don't climb the peak in one leap. You carry one stone at a time. And soon, without even realizing it, you are standing on the summit. The world is addicted to intensity. Social media shows highlight reels of people waking at 4 a.m., cold, plunging, fasting, meditating, journaling, running marathons, building businesses, and writing 10 chapters before breakfast. So you try to do it all. You copy their rituals. You burn out. You collapse. You call yourself lazy. But the Stoic sees the flaw. He doesn't compare routines, he compares results. And over time he sees that the smallest habits, when done with intention, reshape the entire character. Because you're not trying to impress, you're trying to become. No great thing is created suddenly. That's not just a quote, it's a warning. The oak that breaks through the ground spent years as a buried seed. You can't see its struggle. You only see the result, but beneath the surface, something powerful was happening. Quietly, relentlessly, daily. You're not broken because change feels slow. You're not weak because your progress isn't cinematic. You're not failing because you still fall back into old patterns. You are human. And like all humans, you grow in cycles, spiral paths, invisible steps. The key is not to demand perfection, but to build direction. 1%. That's the metric. That's the win. Not quitting when it's boring. Not giving in when it's quiet. Not collapsing because you didn't meet some impossible standard by the end of the week. The Stoic knows that identity is shaped not in peaks, but in pivots, in tiny daily nudges that compound over time. That's where strength is built. That's where regret is replaced by rhythm. And soon, the habit you forced becomes the habit you follow. The journal that felt like a chore becomes the space where your mind breathes. The silence that felt awkward becomes your daily armor. The small decisions you once ignored become your foundation. Because every time you repeat a new pattern, you reinforce a new identity. And every time you stay loyal to that identity, even when it's invisible, you become free. Not all progress will be visible. Not all growth will be praised. But you don't owe the world a show. You owe yourself a structure. And the structure begins here, with 1%, with today. With a shift so small, it looks like nothing, until it becomes everything. Atomic stillness, how morning silence builds inner fortresses, the first silent minutes of the day. There's a moment right after you wake up when the world hasn't touched you yet. No noise, no pressure, no decisions, just breath. And in that breath, there's a doorway, a fragile space between who you were yesterday and who you're becoming today. But most people don't walk through it. They scroll past it. They lose it. Not because they don't care, but because they never noticed it was there. The Stoic notices. He knows that silence is not the absence of sound, it's the presence of control. And in those first minutes of the day, when the world hasn't yet made demands, he builds something most people never think to protect: his mind. The modern world is loud. It doesn't wait. It wants your attention before you even leave the bed. Notifications, headlines, updates, opinions, 1,000 voices all shouting for your focus. And most people surrender before they even stand up. They don't lose the day at noon, they lose it at dawn. That's why the Stoic guards his mornings. He doesn't wake up and react. He wakes up and returns, to himself, to reason, to breath. He creates a pocket of stillness, not because he wants to feel better, but because he knows he's about to enter a world designed to pull him apart. And no man can lead others if he hasn't first led himself. This isn't about routines. It's not about what you eat or how you stretch. This is deeper. This is about reclaiming your mind before the world steals it. It's about choosing what enters your awareness, and more importantly, what doesn't. Because what enters shapes you. In this space of silence, the Stoic doesn't just sit. He sharpens. He listens. Not to podcasts, not to the news, but to the voice within. The one buried under noise. The one that's often drowned by distraction. The one that says, "Don't forget who you are." Most people don't realize how much energy they waste by starting the day in chaos. They rush, they react, they absorb everything. And by noon, they're wondering why they feel exhausted, scattered, irritated. The answer is simple: they never built the fortress. They left the gates open. But you can build it. It doesn't take hours. It doesn't require candles or incense or playlists. All it needs is 5 minutes of presence. 5 minutes where you don't give the world anything. Where you sit, breathe, think or don't think. Where you just exist, fully, without input, without output, without expectation. That stillness is not emptiness, it is preparation. And over time it becomes power. You'll notice it when life gets chaotic and your mind doesn't. When people panic and you don't. When temptation calls and you hear it, but it doesn't move you. Because you already decided who you were before the noise arrived. This is how you begin your day, like a commander, not a captive. And here's what's important. No one will applaud you for this. No one will see it. It won't look like success. It won't impress anyone. But it will change everything. because the person who controls the first minutes of his day controls the direction of his life. That's not philosophy, that's architecture, atomic stillness, not grand, not flashy, but precise. A single moment of sovereignty in a world built on chaos. And once you taste that kind of peace, you stop chasing motivation. You start creating momentum. This is your fortress. This is your return. Invisible resistance, the Stoic art of withstanding small temptations, where most people lose the war without even knowing it began. Not every battle looks like a crisis. Some battles are quiet, hidden in the moment your finger hovers over the screen. In the second you open the fridge without hunger, in the urge to say something just to be heard. These are not dramatic failures, but they're not harmless either. They are the cracks in your armor, the tiny fractures that multiply when left unchecked. You want to live with purpose, but you underestimate the enemy. You think it will arrive wearing red flags, sounding alarms, but it doesn't. It arrives in comfort, in the easy option, in the excuse that feels harmless because no one will notice. But the Stoic notices, because he knows that self-betrayal doesn't need an audience. There's a kind of resistance that no one sees, the kind that doesn't win applause, the kind that doesn't look heroic. But it is, because it demands the rarest form of discipline, the kind that happens in private, saying no to the second snack, choosing not to respond to provocation, closing the tab when you know it leads nowhere. These are not small acts, they're training. And every time you win that invisible battle, you add one brick to the structure of who you're becoming. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Today, adversity is no longer a wild beast or an invading army. It's a screen, a thought, a craving. It's a pattern pretending to be comfort. And the moment you spot it for what it is, that's the moment you become dangerous. Because most people live in reaction. They are pulled, nudged, programmed. They don't choose, they drift. But not you, not anymore. You've begun to see the pattern, and now the game has changed. The Stoic doesn't seek to be untouched by temptation. He expects it, but he doesn't give it power. He prepares. He remembers that strength is not just about lifting weights or enduring pain. It's about restraint. It's about choosing not to follow every impulse like a servant. It's about walking past the easy option and doing what your future self will thank you for, not what your present self craves. And you must understand this. Every time you win this small battle, it doesn't just stop you from falling back. It pushes you forward. You reinforce the identity of someone who is not ruled by urges, someone who commands his day instead of surrendering to it. Someone who sees a trigger and says, "I don't owe it a response." That's freedom. Freedom is not the absence of temptation. It's the presence of choice. And most people never practice that choice. They live like everything is urgent, everything is permission, everything is deserved. But the Stoic understands, you don't earn power by chasing everything that shines. You earn it by walking past what weakens you. So today, when you feel that pull toward distraction, toward reaction, toward some cheap pleasure you won't even remember tomorrow, pause. Not forever. Just long enough to remember who you are. Just long enough to recognize the trap. Just long enough to walk away. That's the real discipline. Not a life of denial, a life of alignment. No one will see it. No one will know. But you will. And that's enough. Because you weren't made to impress the world. You were made to master yourself. And mastery begins here. The discipline of thought. This chapter dives deeper into the mental battlefield, showing that the mind itself is the source of power or defeat. Most people live their entire lives without ever questioning the voice in their head. They believe every word it whispers, every judgment, every fear, every insult. They take it as truth simply because it sounds like them. But the Stoic knows better. He knows the mind can be a liar, a thief, a coward, and a tyrant, all in the same day. He knows that if he doesn't discipline his thoughts will discipline him. The world can be chaotic, but it's nothing compared to an undisciplined mind. That's why Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself every morning to remind his own mind of what was true, of what was worthy, of what was his to control. Because without that training, the voice inside becomes a saboteur. It will drag you back to old patterns. It will turn small challenges into disasters. It will convince you that you're helpless long before reality does. You've seen it happen. A small setback spirals into self-doubt. A passing comment turns into an imagined betrayal. A single failure becomes proof of permanent inadequacy. This is not reality punishing you. This is your own thoughts misused against you. The discipline of thought begins with awareness. It starts by pausing before you believe yourself. Ask, is this thought a fact or a fear? Is it helping me live better or making me smaller? Does it move me closer to virtue or closer to regret? The Stoics treated their own thoughts like unruly students, not tyrants. They interrogated them. They tested them. They refused to surrender to them without proof. Training your thoughts is not about forced positivity. It's not about pretending everything is fine. It's about accuracy. The Stoic does not sugarcoat pain. He faces it. But he doesn't add unnecessary suffering by exaggerating it. He doesn't let the mind tell stories that poison reality. He uses reason as a filter, not emotion as a master. And here's the truth. No one can do this for you. No book, no teacher, no friend. Because only you can hear the full volume of your inner dialogue. Only you can challenge it in the moment it turns destructive. Every time you replace a toxic thought with a true one, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. Every time you refuse to indulge a false narrative, you take back ground on the battlefield of your mind. This is not an instant change. It's a discipline, like strengthening a muscle. At first, you'll catch only the loudest distortions. Over time, you'll notice the subtle ones, the small lies, the quiet fears, the lazy justifications. And with each correction, you'll build a mind that works for you, not against you. Imagine the power of walking into chaos with a calm mind. Imagine facing failure without self-destruction. Imagine hearing criticism without crumbling. That power isn't luck. It isn't gifted. It's trained, built, earned. It's the reward of someone who chose to lead their own thoughts instead of being led by them. So when your mind starts to spiral, when the voice inside tries to convince you you're doomed, pause, breathe. Cross-examine the thought. Ask it for evidence. Challenge it with reason. Remind yourself, I am not my thoughts. I am the one who chooses which thoughts become my reality. That is the discipline of thought. It's quiet, unseen, uncelebrated, but it's the foundation of every other victory. Because until you master your mind, every other success will be temporary. And once you master it, even failure cannot break you. Sacred repetition. Why doing the same thing? Daily isn't boring, it's divine. The world celebrates novelty. It rewards what is new, what is trending, what looks different. It mocks repetition. It calls it dull, robotic, uninspired. But the Stoic sees through the illusion. He knows that greatness is not built in the fireworks of fresh beginnings, but in the silent persistence of doing the same thing well, day after day. To the undisciplined mind, repetition looks boring. To the disciplined soul, it looks sacred. Think of a blade. Sharpness isn't achieved by a single strike against the whetstone. It's achieved by countless small passes, each one almost invisible, none of them impressive on their own. Over time, the edge becomes deadly precise. The sword becomes an extension of the warrior. That is what sacred repetition does to the character. It refines you so slowly that no one notices, until one day you are unrecognizable. Modern life whispers that you should always be chasing something new, a new diet, a new workout, a new project, a new identity. And because of this, most people live in cycles of excitement and disappointment. They start strong, they burn out, they abandon, they restart. But the Stoic does not chase novelty. He commits to consistency. He understands that mastery is not found in constant reinvention, but in faithful return. Marcus Aurelius wrote the same reminders to himself again and again, not because he forgot, but because he understood. Wisdom isn't a one-time revelation. It's a daily practice. Even emperors need reminders. Even philosophers need repetition. You are no different. At first, the discipline feels heavy. Waking early, journaling, resisting distractions, practicing patience, it seems tedious. But the weight you carry each day is the weight that builds strength. And over time, what once felt forced becomes as natural as breath. The habit stops feeling like a burden. It becomes part of your identity. And identity is stronger than willpower. Repetition doesn't mean stagnation. It means refinement. Each day you show up, you're not doing the exact same thing. You're doing it slightly better. You're polishing the edge. You're narrowing the gap between who you are and who you aim to be. And that slow, invisible progress is where transformation hides. The world will not applaud you for this. It will not see your quiet victories, but you're not doing it for applause. You're doing it because the person who stays loyal to their principles in obscurity becomes unshakable when the storm arrives. When everyone else panics, you will remain steady, not because you're special, but because you trained for this in the ordinary moments no one valued. Sacred repetition is not glamorous. It doesn't feed your ego. It doesn't look like progress on the surface, but it is divine in its simplicity. Each small act, repeated faithfully, becomes a prayer, a declaration, a rebellion against chaos, a promise to yourself that you will not drift with the current, but carve your own path, one deliberate stroke at a time. So when boredom whispers that you're wasting your time, remember, boredom is the disguise growth wears before it's visible. Keep sharpening, keep returning, keep doing the thing no one sees, because every time you return, you are becoming. And one day the world will see what sacred repetition has quietly built, a life of strength, clarity, and unshakable purpose. The evening audit, the 3-minute ritual that restores. Self-trust. This chapter shifts the day's narrative from action to reflection, showing how quiet review builds unshakable self-respect. The day ends quietly. The noise fades, the sun falls, and the world slows just enough for you to hear your own thoughts again. Most people fill this space with distraction. They scroll until sleep. They numb themselves with noise or escape. But the Stoic treats these final moments as sacred ground, because the way you close your day shapes the way you meet the next one. Marcus Aurelius ended his days by writing to himself, not to impress anyone, not to craft perfect sentences, but to audit his own soul. He asked what he did well, where he failed, and what he could carry forward. It wasn't punishment. It was preparation. A simple, honest conversation with the only person who truly knows whether he stayed loyal to his values, himself. You don't need hours for this. You don't need special tools. You need 3 minutes. 3 minutes where you refuse to hide from yourself. 3 minutes where you lay out the truth without shame or pride. Ask yourself, where today did I act with strength? Where did I slip? What small adjustment will help me rise tomorrow? This isn't about self-criticism. It's about self-trust. Because every time you examine your actions honestly, you tell your mind, I can handle the truth. I don't need to pretend. I don't need to escape. And over time, that simple act repairs a trust many people don't even realize they've broken, the trust between intention and action. The undisciplined mind avoids reflection because it fears what it will find. But avoidance doesn't erase failure. It multiplies it. The small betrayals pile up. The guilt hardens. The person you want to be feels farther away. The evening audit stops that drift. It catches you mid-course. It says, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be aware. When you acknowledge where you fell short, you rob the failure of its power. When you recognize where you stood firm, you reinforce your strength. And when you decide one small improvement for tomorrow, you transform regret into momentum. This is how you end a day with dignity, not by erasing mistakes, but by redeeming them. The beauty of this practice is its privacy. No one sees it, no one praises it, but its effects will show in everything you touch. You'll carry less shame because nothing lingers unspoken. You'll carry more confidence because you know exactly where you're growing. And you'll face tomorrow with clarity because you've already chosen where to aim your effort. Think of it as a bridge. Each night you build a small bridge to the next morning. Some nights it will be sturdy, some nights it will be fragile, but you build it anyway. And by building it, You refuse to drift into another day without direction. You refuse to let unconscious habits steer your life. 3 minutes. That's all it takes to reclaim your agency, to anchor your identity, to whisper to yourself, I am still in control. The day is done, but I am not done. Tomorrow is waiting, and I will meet it prepared. The evening audit is not a performance, it's a promise. A promise that no matter how chaotic life becomes, you will not abandon yourself. You will face the truth, adjust your course, and return to the path with humility and strength. Micro-courage. The unseen bravery of the quietly consistent. This section honors the hidden bravery of staying the course when no one applauds. Courage isn't always a battlefield roar. Most of the time, it's invisible. It lives in the quiet, repetitive choices you make when no one is watching and nothing glamorous is at stake. Micro-courage is saying yes to discipline when laziness whispers its invitation. It's walking back to the gym after a week of missed workouts. It's picking up your journal again after you swore you'd keep the habit but let it slip. It's the act of recommitting again and again when the world isn't clapping and you're not even sure anyone will notice. Modern culture celebrates loud victories, viral moments, dramatic transformations. It rarely celebrates the person who refuses to quit in obscurity, but that's where your strength is forged. Because staying steady without validation is rebellion in a world obsessed with instant feedback. The Stoic understands this. He doesn't wait for applause to act. He doesn't measure his worth by attention. He measures it by integrity. Every small act of consistency is an act of bravery. Waking up early to practice stillness. Resisting the urge to numb your discomfort with distraction. Saying no to gossip, even when silence makes you feel isolated. Each moment you choose the harder path, you prove to yourself that your values aren't conditional, that you don't need an audience to do what's right. Micro-courage is subtle, but it accumulates. Each unseen victory strengthens your character. Each quiet choice builds a reservoir of resilience you'll draw upon when life's storms hit. People will call you calm under pressure, but they won't know the hundreds of invisible choices you made to become that way. They'll think you're lucky. You'll know you trained for it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's micro-courage, to live your principles without waiting for permission or praise, to act, not debate, to build, not boast, to persist, even when no one cares. There will be moments when your effort feels meaningless, when you wonder if showing up one more time even matters. That's the test. That's the moment that separates the drifting from the deliberate. Micro-courage whispers, stay the course. It's the voice that says, your unseen work is shaping the person you're becoming, even if the results haven't surfaced yet. The truth is, most people quit not because they lack ability, but because they crave recognition too soon. They stop when the applause doesn't come. They abandon the path when it feels lonely. But the Stoic walks on. He understands that the worth of a life is not measured in applause, but in alignment. He knows that the greatest victories are often invisible until years later, when someone calls you dependable, steady, strong, and you realize they're seeing the accumulation of 1,000 quiet acts of courage. So tonight, when no one notices your effort, hold steady. When progress feels invisible, trust the process. When doubt asks if it's worth it, answer with another small, brave step. Because the world doesn't need another loud promise. It needs another quiet builder. And that builder could be you. That's micro-courage, unseen, uncelebrated, but utterly transformative. Negative visualization, how imagining loss awakens urgency. This chapter explores the ancient practice of premeditatio malorum and reframes it as a modern tool for gratitude and urgency. Most people live as if tomorrow is guaranteed. They plan as if time is infinite, relationships are unbreakable, and opportunities will wait patiently for them. They treat the ordinary moments of today as disposable, believing there will always be another morning, another chance, another hug. But the Stoic knows better. He knows that everything can change without warning. He knows that the illusion of permanence is the root of complacency, and so he trains his mind with a practice most would rather avoid: imagining loss. This isn't morbid curiosity, it's wisdom. The Stoics called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself that the people he loved were mortal, that fortune was fickle, and that time was slipping through his fingers. Not to despair, to awaken, to sharpen appreciation, to act with urgency. Close your eyes for a moment and picture your life without the things you take for granted. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that today's simple, unremarkable blessings are gone. Your health, your work, your freedom to choose, the voice of someone you love. Feel the weight of that possibility. Not to crush you, but to break the trance that tells you have forever. When you imagine loss, you start to see clearly. The small annoyances lose their power, the arguments shrink, the petty distractions fade, the coffee tastes richer, the laughter sounds louder. The touch of a friend carries new meaning. Gratitude stops being a vague concept and becomes a visceral experience. And gratitude, when it's this alive, changes how you move through the world. Negative visualization doesn't make life darker. It makes it brighter. It strips away entitlement and reminds you that every moment is borrowed. It exposes how fragile your routines are and how precious even the dullest day can be. It whispers, "You are not promised another Monday." And in that whisper is freedom. The freedom to stop postponing what matters, to stop holding grudges, to stop living half asleep. The modern world fears thoughts of loss. It tells you to chase constant positivity, to avoid discomfort, to silence any idea that makes you uneasy. But discomfort is a teacher, and the Stoic willingly learns from it. He doesn't dwell on tragedy, but he glances at it just long enough to remember what's important. He knows that imagining the worst doesn't make it happen. It makes him ready, grateful, alive. When you live with this awareness, you begin to speak differently. You forgive faster. You love more openly. You work with more purpose. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to begin because you realize the perfect moment is now. You stop treating your goals like distant dreams because you understand that distance isn't guaranteed. So tonight, as you close your eyes, remember, the people you love are gifts, not fixtures. Your time is a loan, not a possession. And the life you want to live is not waiting for some mythical future. It's asking to be lived now. Negative visualization is not about fear. It's about freedom. It's about urgency without panic, gratitude without complacency. It's about refusing to sleepwalk through a life that will one day, inevitably, end. And when you practice it, something shifts. The sunrise feels different. The noise of the world feels smaller. The next step, no matter how small, feels essential. That is the power of seeing what could be lost and choosing to cherish what is still here. The Stoic Journal, your daily dialogue with who you could become. This chapter reframes journaling as an active conversation with the self you're building, not just a routine. Most people treat journaling like a diary of events, a list of tasks, or a venting space for frustration. That's why they quit. It feels shallow, repetitive, unimportant. But to the Stoic, journaling isn't about recording the day, it's about shaping the mind. It's not a report of what happened, it's a rehearsal of who you're becoming. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to impress history. He wrote to hold himself accountable, to sharpen his reason, to talk himself back onto the path when distraction or despair threatened to pull him away. The Stoic Journal is not for performance. No one will read it. It doesn't need perfect sentences or clever phrases. It needs honesty. Brutal, tender honesty. It's a conversation between your present self and the version of you that waits on the horizon. Each page is a mirror reflecting your habits, your desires, your fears, and offering you the chance to respond. In the chaos of modern life, your mind becomes scattered. You absorb headlines, notifications, opinions, and noise. You lose track of what's truly yours. The journal becomes a place to return, to strip away the voices that aren't yours, to remember what you stand for, to notice patterns, the triggers that provoke you, the victories that steady you, the excuses that keep circling back. Over time, you'll start to see the threads of your character, and with that awareness comes power. The power to change deliberately. This isn't about writing endlessly. Even a few sentences can shift your day. Write about where you fell short, not to shame yourself, but to understand why. Write about what you did well, not to boast, but to anchor that strength. Write down one thing you will do tomorrow that moves you 1% closer to the person you respect. These small notes become a dialogue across time. Weeks later, you'll read them and realize you've become the person your past self was reaching for. The Stoic journal also protects you from drifting. Without reflection, you risk living the same unexamined day over and over, mistaking motion for progress. But when you write, you catch yourself. You notice when your habits start to slip. You see the difference between a bad day and a bad pattern, and you reclaim your power to steer your own life. The act of writing slows your mind. It forces you to articulate what you're feeling, which transforms vague unease into clear understanding. Many problems lose their grip the moment you name them. Many fears reveal their smallness the moment you put them on paper. And many dreams become commitments the moment you write them, as if they already belong to you. You don't need the perfect journal or pen. You don't need an aesthetic workspace or a special routine. You need a willingness to meet yourself honestly, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. The Stoic journal is not about appearance, it's about alignment. Over time, you'll see its power in unexpected ways, in how you speak to others with more patience, in how you approach setbacks with less panic, in how you notice the quiet beauty of ordinary days, because each entry is not just a record, it's a reminder, a promise, a map. And the most extraordinary thing about this practice, it outlives the day. The words you write tonight will greet the person you're becoming tomorrow. They will meet you on mornings when motivation is gone and whisper, "You've been here before, you know what to do. Keep walking." That's the Stoic journal. Not a task, not a trend, but a daily dialogue with your own potential. A private conversation that quietly builds a stronger, clearer, more intentional version of you. The 1% that matters most. When progress is choosing to stay standing. This chapter concludes the journey with emotional depth, Stoic wisdom, and a gentle invitation to engage. Some days, progress is not spectacular. It's not a breakthrough, a new habit, or a visible win. Some days, progress is choosing not to collapse. It's standing when everything in you wants to fall. It's holding the line in silence, without applause, without proof that it's working. That's the 1% that matters most, the courage to stay upright in the storm. The Stoics understood that life would not always reward effort with instant results. Marcus Aurelius led an empire through plague, war, and betrayal, and still he wrote, "Do not despair. The work of today is enough." He knew that virtue was not measured by comfort, but by perseverance. On the days when your plans crumble, when your mind feels heavy, when the world seems indifferent, those are the days when character is forged. There's a quiet strength in refusing to quit on a day that offers you no reason to continue. The world won't see it, no one will congratulate you, but you will know. And that knowledge builds a kind of resilience that can't be shaken by setbacks. It teaches you that you are not defined by the weight you carry, but by the choice to carry it one step further. The 1% isn't always about progress in the visible sense. Sometimes it's not moving backward. Sometimes it's protecting the ground you've already gained. Sometimes it's simply breathing through a hard night so you can rise into a new morning. And those seemingly small acts, the ones you dismiss as meaningless, are the foundation of every great transformation. When you choose to stay standing, you're practicing faith in yourself. Faith that tomorrow might hold something lighter. Faith that the small habits you've been building are still working, even if you can't see their growth yet. Faith that strength is not a feeling, it's a decision. And each time you make that decision, you become less fragile, less dependent on external validation, more rooted in your own integrity. The world tells you to measure your life by highlights, by milestones, by visible victories, but your real strength is revealed in the moments no one notices, the quiet refusal to abandon yourself. And over time, those moments compound. They become the invisible scaffolding that supports everything else. Remember, the 1% that matters most is not about being extraordinary. It's about being faithful to the path, even when it feels thankless. It's about trusting that standing today makes rising tomorrow possible. It's about refusing to surrender your future to a single difficult moment. So when you feel unseen, when you feel stuck, when you feel like the journey is endless, stand anyway. Stay steady. Return again tomorrow. That choice is enough. And if these words reminded you of your own quiet strength, consider subscribing and sharing in the comments what your 1% will be today. Your voice might be the spark someone else needs to keep standing.